Thanks, Mary. This is a talk about pixels, the small units of digital image that make up images, text, and everything else that we see on our screens. My work life every day is made up of millions of pixels. 95% of my work time, my team are reduced to pixels in Zoom meetings, Slack chats, in emails. I've been leading distributed engineering organizations for the last 5 years. I currently lead Circle CI's product engineering organization. We're 65 people and we're distributed across the globe between Europe, the Americas, and several countries in Asia. Now, can you please raise your hand if you've ever worked remotely? It's probably 40% of the room, thank you. Now, many of you are also probably familiar with distributed systems and not just with distributed teams. And Nick just spoke about systems earlier. The team that I work with is the most complex system that I know. It's a distributed system of people. We're distributed across the globe. We're connected through different interfaces. We communicate in different ways, and each individual component of our system is highly complex and full of surprises. So how do you turn this system into a team? Research shows that there are 5 key factors which make teams high-performing, and many of you may have heard of those. The first one is psychological safety. It means that we feel free to express our work-relevant thoughts and feelings to others, and we believe that they won't think less of us if we make a well-intentioned mistake or we ask for help. There's also dependability. All of us teammates reliably completing quality work and on time. Then high-performing teams need structure and clarity. Everyone on our team needs to understand expectations, goals, and accountability. But high-performing teams also have meaning and impact. We find a sense of purpose in our work or the output, and we feel that our work has an impact. Now, the research doesn't say that these teams all have to share the same fridge in the office, and based on everything I know about office fridges, that could actually be a good thing. But the research was focused on co-located teams, and a lot of the practices that high-performing teams use are much easier to do when everyone is in the same room. And building teams is hard, and building distributed teams is even harder. I think the main difference between co-located and distributed teams is that a distributed team requires us to be so much more intentional. Much less happens organically through osmosis or at the literal water cooler. And many challenges that any teams face are exacerbated when we're distributed across locations and time zones. And many common ways of building and leading teams can't be just applied easily, so we often need to get much more creative as leaders. Building any team is fundamentally about inclusion, and this also goes for distributed teams. It's impossible to replicate the exact same working experience for everyone, though, and I also don't think that should be the goal. I think instead acknowledging our differences that we all bring to the table and building common ground is key. We need to make distributed teams successful, and we can do so when we level the playing field and when we ensure that everyone has the same and equal opportunities to contribute. And distributed teams need leadership at all levels. At Circle CI, we expect all our engineers to develop leadership skills at all levels, starting with junior levels. And it's because we need leaders at all levels in our organization. We need them to carry the organization forward, to help us stay aligned, and to help us grow and move forward together. Now, every one of us plays a role in shaping our teams. And this is why this talk is for all of you, not just the ones who raised their hand when I asked who worked remotely previously. No matter what your role is, and no matter if your closest teammate sits in the next room or on the next continent, you play an important part in shaping and building your team. So, what does it mean to be a leader in a distributed team? Growing up, my family used to help in our community a lot with construction projects and with building homes. In my work as a leader, I've been thinking back to this work a lot. The way that I think about our work as leaders is that we create structures to help people work together in such a way that everyone can do their best work. We provide building blocks for others to lean on and rely on. As engineering leaders, we are like mortar. We connect those structures, teams, and people. We hold them together, and we also identify and fill gaps between them. After all, our work as leaders isn't much about us. It's about the people and the teams that we support. We build the structures to help others shine. I think that structures are key to inclusive practices on any team, but distributed teams need them even more. And the added challenge is that it's often much trickier to identify gaps. So today, I want to focus on how we can build high-performing distributed teams, with a focus on using connection, collaboration, and communication. And let's start by looking at how we hone connection. As humans, we strive to be connected with a larger purpose, but we also seek to feel connected with other people around us. When we're in the same location as our teammates, we pick up small signals about them. Like, we see their body language when they walk into the office in the morning. We see if they're tense or if they're relaxed, and we also sometimes know how much coffee they're having. These small signals get lost remotely, and other things become much more important instead. For example, energy levels are one of my favorite examples of this. When my colleagues in San Francisco start their workday, they're high energy, they're excited. At the same time, it's 5 or 6 p.m. for me. I've probably had a day. It's already been dark for 5 hours because it's November. I am tired, I can't form a clear thought anymore, and we're about to have a one-on-one conversation. So, connection is small things, and the basis of all connection is trust. Teams are built on mutual trust as a foundation, and as leaders, it's our job to go the extra mile to build it, because all our actions, especially the small ones, contribute to building or ruining it. And trust starts when we look beyond the pixels that we see on our screens, and we make space for our humanness. When I joined Circle CI last year, I met with everyone in our engineering organization because I wanted to get to know the people that we were working with. During one of those conversations, one of our engineers said to me, "I need to meet my team in person every once in a while to remind myself that they're actual people." The sentiment struck a chord with me, and I've been thinking about it since. When we largely interact with two-dimensional piles of pixels or icons on our screens, it's just so easy to forget that we interact with actual humans. And when we center each other's humanness, we go beyond knowing the domain expertise that our teammates have or what they got done last week. Instead, we get curious about who they are as people, what drives and motivates and what frustrates them. And it starts with really small things, like when we meet people, like greet them in the appropriate greeting for their time zone. Say good morning when it is, even when it's your evening, because it signals that you understand where they're at in their life right now. And don't underestimate the power of the random Slack channel. I think that special interest channels like random, dogs, cats, and we have so many more. These channels are so popular because they allow us to see each other as humans, and they help us connect at an interpersonal level. But it's also honestly just fun to know that one of my colleagues made another successful sourdough bread on the weekend, and another one built a Lego fort with their kids just yesterday. When we had a new team getting together recently, they put together a document where every one of them introduced themselves to the others, sharing things like how they got into tech, what they care about in their lives and their hobbies and pets. There's of course also meeting in person, but I think with the majority of our time being distributed, it's an important thing to do, but we need to find other ways to hone our connection on a day-to-day basis. And acknowledging our humanness also means acknowledging that we all have different values and expectations. These are often implicit, and we can connect as a team by surfacing them and talking about what we expect from each other, and defining standards for how we collaborate, communicate, and what we value. Some of our teams have defined communication guidelines, including a commitment to over-communication, and they review how they're living up to those in retrospectives. And in this blog post, one of our engineering managers wrote about those. As leaders, it's our responsibility to make sure that our expectations are always clear to everyone on our team. And that's one of the many reasons why weekly one-on-one meetings are the backbone of our collaboration and our relationships with our teammates. I also want to briefly touch on expectations at the organizational level a bit. When I joined Circle CI last year, the team had grown 50% several years in a row. And it's increased its geographic distribution as well. The management team was incredibly small. And after all this growth, we were running into some challenges around evolving our engineering culture. We had a bunch of knowledge silos on teams, we struggled with collaboration, with clarity on our delivery process, and several other things. But at the same time, we also had great teams with a lot of folks who were really keen on growing. So what we needed was a way to take all this enthusiasm and build a pathway for it that would allow us to scale our organization further. One of the things we did was create this engineering competency matrix. It's our career growth framework for engineers. This matrix is now woven into everything we do, from hiring to structured feedback to performance reviews. And we have a similar framework for our engineering managers. This helps us hold everyone to the same standards, and it's an important component in allowing us to continue clarifying expectations as we scale, and especially with the distribution that we have, it helps us ensure to maintain our engineering culture. And setting expectations is also about decision-making, which can be, again, pretty tricky for distributed teams. We've been using decision records in our organization for a while, mostly for technical decisions with bigger impact. We've iterated on them a few times and used them to discuss decisions, make them, and disseminate the information after. Now, once we've set expectations, the next thing that we need to do with those is, of course, use them to grow together and actually hold each other to those standards. Praise is a really beautiful way to connect as a team. In our company Slack, we have a channel called Gratitude, in which people share their appreciation for others who've helped them. And it's a really beautiful way for us to see how small acts of kindness help us connect as a company. An even better way to connect as a team, though, is helping each other grow through constructive criticism. In many of the distributed teams I've worked with, though, I found that this can be really difficult to do well. When we mostly see each other on screens, it can easily feel like we have such little precious time together that it becomes difficult to have harder conversations, which exacerbates artificial harmony on teams. I found a good starting point for improving feedback on teams can be when we know where all of us wants to grow. I'm currently using these questions to discuss feedback with a team of mine. This template you see in the slide is from the book Feedback and Other Dirty Words by Tamara Chandler, and it's a really good primer for different feedback structures for teams. What we did with my team was we wrote these questions down in a document, and then each of us added answers to how we prefer to receive feedback, what we care about the most at the moment, and what we're working on. We then had a team meeting about it and discussed it as a team, and now we can use what we learned about each other's areas of growth to give each other much more meaningful and much more specific feedback. Now, connection also is about staying connected with the goals that we're looking to achieve as a team and as a company. I always encourage my teammates to ask, what problem are we trying to solve? This question is so simple, but it's so important because it helps us not just gather context, but it also allows us to think about different approaches to solving problems instead of settling on one specific solution way too early. In the larger scheme of things, we also do a lot of work to create alignment and maintain it over time. And one big aspect of this is helping everyone understand how their work relates to our business goals and how they are contributing to what we're looking to achieve as a company. So we've been using OKRs for a while to achieve this. And everything we learned about how not to use OKRs is a separate conference talk, or ask me about this later. We're still iterating on our approach to it. The general way that we're using it, though, is we capture our team's input when we're planning our quarterly work, and then revisit the OKRs during our weekly team meetings, as well as in department-wide meetings, review progress, but also have an open conversation about impediments and any challenges we run into. The other point I want to address in the context of connection is when it's lacking. I think many remote workers struggle with loneliness. And I view this loneliness as a response to lacking interpersonal connection. I've been dealing with remote loneliness too, and it can be really hard to combat. When we learn someone on our team is struggling with this, the best thing we can do is listen and genuinely support them. It can also help to reflect with them on what makes them feel energized and connected and figure out if they can build more of those things into their daily work. Other things I found helpful was to structure workdays more and build in offline activities like going for a walk to the gym or meeting people offline, for example, at local meetups. I also always encourage my teammates to book regular one-on-ones with others on their team or use Donut Pals to connect with people outside of their team. It's an application to basically set up random one-on-ones across your company. But one thing I also want to call out, and that's important, is that there is a huge difference between loneliness and disconnection. Loneliness is about lack of interpersonal connection, but disconnect is about information needed to get our job done. The amount of information that distributed teams get on a daily basis is often really high, but it's often difficult to know what really matters. I think lack of context is one of the biggest difficulties that distributed teams face, especially because it's so easy to equate amount of information with availability of context. And I've seen this be a big pitfall, and I've seen teams fall apart over it. When our teammates feel like they're missing out on important discussions and decisions, we need to make sure to understand what's missing for them and convey information and context much more effectively. We need to convey why things are happening, how we arrived at conclusions, what's next, what are implications, etc. Contextualization is key in distributed teams for helping our teammates make sense of their work environment. So we just explored how we can hone connection in our teams. When we make space for each other's humanness, we clarify expectations and we help each other grow. We can build trust with our teammates. And this connection sets the basis for our collaboration as a team. We shape collaboration in large parts already with our own mindset. I think a lot about power dynamics in teams and organizations. Many of us hold explicit or implicit power on our teams, may it be through formal or informal leadership roles, through domain expertise, seniority, or tenure. But all of us also carry biases and blind spots. And we can set ourselves up for much better collaboration when we approach it with humbleness and awareness of power dynamics. This also means, again, small things like avoiding to dominate conversations, which is even possible in written form. Like when you're sending someone walls of text or you bury a document in comments or document a pull request in comments and feedback as well. Any of us who are leaders, especially when we're in meetings or when we have discussions in chat, we need to ask ourselves, how much space am I taking up right now? I also think it's our responsibility to open up space for others and inviting them into conversations by asking, what's your opinion on this? I'd like to hear your thoughts. This way, we also make sure that everyone is aware of important conversations that are happening and they're able to contribute. I also think collaboration is one of the best vehicles that distributed teams have for relationship building. As leaders, relationships are the very foundation for us to be able to do our job well to begin with. But relationships are equally important for everyone on our team, because collaboration isn't just about the output of work. Our engineering teams use pair programming a lot. This helps them build relationships with their teammates. It makes our teams more resilient. It helps us avoid knowledge silos and distribute information. And it's also been a really great tool for onboarding new teammates. But in the context of collaboration and knowledge sharing especially, I also want to talk about hero culture a bit. Hero culture describes a culture where organizations reward very talented people who consistently go the extra mile to get seemingly impossible tasks done by themselves and under lots of pressure. Many companies reward this kind of heroism through promotions or increasing influence, compensation, or visibility. Hero culture is unfortunately still incredibly common in our industry, and I've seen it have disastrous effects on teams and organizations. It can be even more pervasive on distributed teams because of the typically disproportionately high visibility of this type of work compared to other work. Hero culture weakens teams, and it sets up the hero for failure by putting them into a lot of pressure on them and putting them into a self-perpetuating downward spiral of being increasingly the only person who can solve problems. Because of its pervasive nature, leaders in distributed teams need to be extra mindful of it. And we need to keep in mind that we as leaders play a large part in creating hero culture to begin with, through the structures that we build and through the behaviors that we encourage and reward. This is why hero culture is the result of organizational failure. And it's a structural issue and it's really hard to combat. But it's our responsibility as leaders to identify and fix it and make things better for the people who are affected by it. Collaboration also means learning together. The way we talk about failure on our teams in particular has high impact on whether everyone on our team feels safe. And the talk earlier about reviewing incidents is a really good example of that. This is why it's so important to keep postmortems blameless and hold regular retrospectives to improve how we collaborate. But there's also great power in admitting what we don't know. One of the lead engineers I currently work with has a great approach to this. They're a really experienced engineer with deep knowledge of our system, but they will frequently ask questions in public channels, saying, I don't know how this service works, can someone help me with it? This way, they're using their own power and privilege to create space for others to learn. And as an aside, one of the secret superpowers of admitting what we don't know is that it can be a great starting point for the collective realization that actually no one knows. And that's always a good thing to find out, because it allows us to fix that together. So we just explored how a mindset of humbleness helps us make space for others, and how we can learn together through intentional collaboration. One more important point we can't neglect when we talk about team building is communication, of course. Communication is at the core of our work every day. But with the time zone distribution of my teams, every tiny pixel of communication matters. When things are left unsaid or unclear, we easily lose 24 hours just going back and forth over a single question. And our communication modes are shifted. Studies done in the 1960s showed that 55% of communication is body language, 38% is tone of voice, and only 7% is the actual work spoken. So when we interact as members of distributed teams, we largely lack body language and our communication gets vastly reduced, limiting the richness of our interactions. And a large portion of communication usually depends on our ability to adjust our communication to our audience. We read a room, or we read someone's reaction and we respond to it, which becomes difficult when we deal with spotty connections. We can only see someone else as a giant pile of pixels, or we communicate asynchronously. So good, well-timed communication is really vital for distributed teams. And it's an incredibly hard thing to do well. The starting point, I think, is open communication. It means sharing everything people need to know in order to be able to do their job well. Whenever you learn new or important information, ask yourself, is there a reason for me not to share this? I also think that openness means avoiding surprises. There's a famous Bill Gates quote that goes along the lines of, bad news should travel faster than good news. But bad or complicated news can be pretty difficult to share and can be quite the heavy baggage to travel with. So when there's news that affects several people, especially when it's difficult news, I always put together a communication plan. Like this one that you see in this slide, I use it to make sure I get the sequencing right, but also make sure I inform everyone who needs to know, which is extra crucial when folks are distributed across many different time zones. I also always share this plan and my progress on it with my peer groups, so they're informed on where we're at, but also share it with the people that I talk to. It always avoids a lot of awkwardness when people know who already knows a certain bit of information and who they can talk to. Now, granted, this approach is much slower than just sending an email blast to everyone and calling it a day. But sometimes there's also no way around that email, but usually is. Because this approach gives people time to process. It allows them to ask questions, but it also helps me, because for me it means that I can understand many more perspectives, and then when I actually send an email to a larger group, like our organization in this case, I can communicate much more effectively because I already know what people are interested in. But openness is also about access, specifically access to information. Wherever possible and legal, make sure that information is accessible for everyone, for example, through shared document drives. I view documentation especially as a continuous investment in our future selves. I make a habit of frequently encouraging my teammates to add to our docs. And we also use a tool that reminds us to keep our documentation up to date, which helps. As we all know, maintenance is always the hardest part. Documenting everything, especially important information, is really key to avoiding games of telephone, so misunderstandings through over-reliance on word of mouth. These misunderstandings are really easy to get into with distributed teams, and believe me, I've been there too often. So whenever you set expectations, or you communicate direction, or you really communicate anything that will be important now, but also in the future, write it down and be thorough in how you disseminate it to ensure that everyone understands and is able to ask questions. But many of these communication strategies rely on writing. And if there's one thing you take away from this section, learn to write better, because it will fundamentally change the way you interact with the people in your life. Writing well is about being inclusive. It means writing for others instead of for ourselves, and prioritizing our desire to be understood over a desire we may have to sound smart or clever. Writing well means keeping our sentences short and keeping them straightforward. And it also means being mindful of cultural differences, of which distributed teams chronically have quite a few. A while back, I wrote in an email to my team, let's table this question. A few very confused messages by my teammates later, I learned that to table something means let's postpone it in American English. In British English, it means let's discuss it now. I never told anyone what I actually meant. So I can tell you from experience, avoiding idioms or cultural references is always a great idea. And add emotion to your words. Many of us sound much harsher or more curt than we intend to in written form. And conveying emotion with words can sometimes be difficult, but add a few emoji to the mix to convey how you're actually feeling about things. But writing is also only 10% of the work. I think the hard part is always in the editing. I edit any message that I write before I send it, and I recommend you do the same. The 3 things I check are always, is my message clear? Second, are my expectations clear? Am I conveying well what I expect, by when, and from whom? And then there's the third one, which I like to call my anticipation or the educated guess. Depending on who I'm writing to, it's more or less educated. And the question is, what could the recipient be asking me in response, which I can already answer now? This last question helps us reduce turnaround time, but it also helps us build empathy and helps us understand how good our relationships with our people on our teams are. The last communication skill I want to briefly cover is asking good questions. When we work remotely, it's key to use the limited face time we have with our teammates to ask questions and work to understand them, their motivations, their approaches, and their ideas. I always recommend preparing questions before meeting with folks, and also using follow-up questions to dig deeper, like asking, what makes you say that? Why did you take this approach? Or is there anything else that's important? But asking better questions is also about giving the other person space to answer. But silence can be incredibly uncomfortable in remote meetings. Again, because voice is usually the only signal that we receive. And it's especially weird in larger group meetings. So it can be really easy to feel the urge to fill that void of silence with something, like really anything, worst case, just a bad joke. But learn to sit with silence, even though it's hard. Because sitting with silence leaves space for the other person. And especially on group calls, it can help people who needed more time to formulate a response before speaking up. So good, well-timed communication is about avoiding surprises through open, thoughtful communication, which we tailor to our audiences to create understanding and leave space for others to process. Now we've gone over connection, collaboration, and communication. And the last word I want to add is continuity. Building great teams is hard, and it's a lot of work. Many of the tools that I shared today, I learned the hard way through mistakes I made and through challenges I went through with my teams. And building a team is never done. All of us constantly grow, change, and the organizations that we're in grow and change. Systems of humans are ever evolving and full of surprises, which is one of the main reasons why I love working with people so much. Building our teams is something continuous that we do every single day. We need to continuously learn and grow together. So no matter where you are on your team, and no matter if your closest teammate sits across the table or across an ocean from you, focus on strong connection, intentional collaboration, and conscious communication with your teammates. And continue building your team every single day and one pixel at a time. Thank you.